We are live. Hello.
Evening.
Hello.
Thanks for watching when you get involved. So tonight we were going to have a little chat about self-employed and getting a mortgage that route. Dun, dun, dun. And I guess the differences and sort of breaking it down of what you would need, Dom, and how to go about getting a mortgage in respect to that route, because there's a lot of people who are now self-employed. I think, was it you who said a stat last week that a certain amount of new businesses and people becoming self-employed have opened up?
Since the pandemic, isn't it?
It's COVID. Oh, we've lost Dom.
We've lost Dom.
He will come back. We'll chat between us for a minute.
Should we have a mortgage chat without the mortgage? Without our mortgage. That would be dangerous, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would be dangerous. I suppose, Neil, for the moment, whilst we're waiting for Dom to come back. Oh, here he is. Almost. Hang on, let him back in the room. He's back in the room.
I'm not sure what I did there, guys, to be honest.
Dinner time, is it? Is she calling you for dinner?
Basically, I should just not touch things and then it'd be all right, wouldn't it?
Yeah, keep away.
We were about to have a chat about mortgages, just me and Dan. That could be dangerous.
Yeah, it would be.
Even I would tune into that.
We'd let anyone.
We were just saying that during last year, and probably because of the COVID and the pandemic, there's a lot more people now gone into opening their own businesses. A lot more people are now self-employed. And actually, there's big differences which me and Neil were aware of, but don't really understand either. So we want to know as much about this, about being self-employed and going and getting a mortgage. And actually, what do you need to know and what the big difference is? So, anything you can tell us?
Yeah, so it is... Let's bust the myth. It's not more difficult to get a mortgage if you're self-employed. It just means that there are different requirements and different aspects of due diligence that the lender will want to apply. Yeah. So most people know if you're employed permanent, let's just stick to permanent employment for the purposes of now. You just need to have 3 months pay slips and, evidence that salary is coming in, and that's it. Pretty much, it's job done. If you're self-employed, the lender wants to know a bit more about you and the business. So the typical start point is, what are you? Are you a limited company or are you a sole trader? Because the way that they assess you is slightly different. So if you're a sole trader, typically is you work off a basis of net profit. Basically, that's how people pay themselves. They don't have to pay themselves a salary, so it's net profit. If it's limited company, it is predominantly, and I'll talk about some variation, but predominantly lender will assess salary and dividend, and you use that as your total income for the previous 2 tax years. So to support those numbers, they want to see last 2 years books, accounts produced by a chartered accountant or similar, and they also require to see your SA 302s, which decoded is effectively, it's like a self-employed P60. So it's what happens when your tax return goes in, HMRC, you then end up with the SA 302, which comprises of your tax year overview and the calculations or computations that have been calculated or carried out underneath to show what your total income was, what your taxable element was, the amount of tax due, and when it's supposed to be paid. And you aggregate all of those things together, and the affordability assessment is basically the same. How much did this person pay themselves over the last 2 years? If you've got 2 year track record and you've earned less this year than last year or the previous tax year, typically the lender will use the lowest, the most recent amount, the lowest amount. If it's kind of, more and less, they'll then take an average of 2 years. Yeah, so that's an important differential to make.
Does that vary then? So, because I was going to say, I've heard it from time to time where it's a little bit less, or am I making that up?
When you say vary, I'm not sure I follow, Neil.
in terms of how many years books you'll need? Is it always 2 years?
It's not always 2 years. There are some that will work off one.
Okay. So again, it's just.
But typically, 2 years opens the gate to virtually the whole market, pretty much.
Okay.
Okay.
It's like most things. There's options.
Yeah. Because if you get into the weeds of it, and this is often a trap that people find themselves in. So they are working hard. They are taking what they need from the business, but also trying to leave profit behind because they want the business to be strong and, to have cash flow and that type of thing. So, running a business and paying yourself everything and not leaving much behind, that's not how big businesses operate. It's not why a smaller limited company would operate. But if you then get the urge to buy a house and you haven't really paid you've paid yourself enough because your costs are very low. So a good example of this is a young person who's running their own business. They're living at home with mum and dad. Their costs are quite low. So they're only paying themselves what they need pretty much because, why pay yourself a salary you don't need? You're going to attract tax and everything else and leave the profit behind. Suddenly then get an urge to buy a house. And you go to the lender and they say, well, we've looked at your last 2 years' income from your 302s and, you've paid yourself in total 24,000. So your overall affordability is going to be roughly 4.5 times that, which isn't a lot if you want to buy a house in the Berkshire area. So I've done one of these recently, although it took a while, and it was not the client's fault, not my fault per se. It's just getting into a different conversation. There are lenders that will say, well, do you know what? We understand that. So we're prepared to assess the limited company's net profit as for the calculation. So salary and net profit, ignoring, before dividend. So that, of course, drives it up. So even though you've not paid yourself it, you can see that the profit's in the business. The wrinkle comes, they'll only do that if you're 100% owner. So if you've got two directors and you own 50% each, they'll say, well, how do we know the other directors are going to agree that, if you wanted to, you could draw down that money? So there are, like everything, there's always options.
Yeah. Yeah, that's where me and Neil will come stuck, being 50-50 and what we do. So that makes sense. Okay.
What are you on about? You signed 60-40.
To me. So you said, so does that mean basically, so from my point of view, so that you can add, if you're a limited company and you pay yourself,
yeah,
you can add what you pay yourself as a salary from that company and your dividends as an earning. But if you just pay yourself a lower income and leave the rest in the business, whether you're a sole trader or limited company, obviously your overall earnings are going to look lower even if you earn them. So basically, you can borrow, in a nutshell, you would be able to borrow less even if you could physically have the money. Yeah,
so sole trader, they always work off net profit.
Always, so, okay.
It doesn't really matter what your drawings have been. They've just assessed the profitability of the business and turnover profit. That's kind of how it goes, because you don't have to pay yourself a salary as a sole trader, do you? You can sort of run your drawings as you wish. Whereas if you're limited, you are really needing to take salary and dividend. So a lot of this just comes down to planning, guys. If you want to buy a house, then you've got to maybe have a bit of a further horizon than if you're employed, just because you need to demonstrate that you're paying yourself a suitable amount. But like I say, there's generally things that we can do within the context of the lender landscape and try and find solutions to it. But it gets harder. The more unique the circumstance, the harder it gets.
There are a lot of lenders out there that, for I guess exactly the same. Then is it the lenders are pretty much the same in terms of the ones you can go to for self-employed and normal employed? There's no real difference. Rates and things like that are pretty similar, or they change again.
Yeah, you don't get penalised for being self-employed on a rate perspective. The vast majority operate in the same way, salary and dividend for limited. There are some variations. Probably the only other major difference that actually is now aligned with how employed people are assessed is that pre-pandemic, lenders didn't used to ask for bank statements from self-employed people because there's no salary to prove per se. You're doing that through other means, but because the pandemic's fundamentally affected or disrupted certain businesses and trades, old books, if you like, are less trustworthy if if the ability of the business to trade has been hampered. Then what they're asking to see, 3 to 6 months bank statements just to see what the turnover through the business has actually been.
Yeah.
So if you, I don't know, think about an example. Imagine you were an artisan street food vendor, for example. That's quite a popular thing, isn't it? On the festival circuit and the Christmas market circuit, all that sort of thing. It'd be very hard for those people to demonstrate any turnover, I would suggest. So their previous tax year books, 1920 would look good. 20 to 21, there's probably not a lot of money gone through the business, and that's what they're trying to divine, basically, what has actually happened.
Yeah, that makes sense. I actually got a question slightly different, but actually made me think of it, if that's all right.
Yeah.
Kind of throw a curveball at you here. Because we mentioned about the pandemic and so forth, and I'm sure I remember you saying a while back when we were talking probably last year, but there's been a lot of support, hasn't there, and relief from the government in different ways, which has been good. So people have been able to claim time off their mortgage if need be. That's been more easy to get. I mean, I'm one of the people who did that right at the start when I needed to.
Yeah.
There's people that have got government grants where they've been self-employed and things like that, where a lump sum. Can that affect your lending over the next year or two if it looks like you're taking support? Is that a difficult one to answer?
The answer is it could. So, lenders will take a view on somebody's circumstances. For example, payment holidays. If somebody was in the middle of a payment holiday and trying to, borrow more money, by definition, you're showing signs of financial distress. So why would they lend you more money? Once you're out of it, and you're back to paying down on all your commitments, it kind of goes away. There was a bit of discomfort for self-employed people. I think that if they'd taken government grants and other such things, that was also being taken as evidence of financial distress. But now we're kind of coming out the other side. Government stimulus is sort of dropping off, isn't it? I think we can see, just as everyone is seeing a light at the end of the tunnel. Lenders coming back in large numbers, back to 90%, indicates that their belief is that the way forward is coming, and there's a little bit less concern. So I wouldn't have that as an issue now. If somebody had taken some stimulus in the past and needed to explore it, best thing to do is get in contact with a decent independent advisor and tell them everything, and then we'll see what we can do, really.
Yeah, perfect. So actually, by sounds of things, it's not too different.
It just sounds like different hoops,
effectively.
Yeah, just as many, slightly different in terms of what you've got to do and the process. But it sounds like if you're self-employed and you're worrying about getting a mortgage, you just got to have all the information and look as good as you can to the lender. Yeah. Which is like anyone, really, isn't it?
Pretty much, yeah. It's just, I mean, there really is no difference. It's just a slightly different set of evidence. I think that the thing that causes the issue is when people have not paid themselves a huge amount of money for whatever reason, and they know their turnover is great, they've got a nice strong business, but it comes down to salary at the end of the day, or salary and dividends. And if you're not paying yourself, particularly if you're in a partnership, how does the lender know that you could just dial up your earnings to suit you in the event of getting a loan? I think that's the issue. Whereas if you're employed by a business and you're being paid a salary, that's a contractual commitment on part of the employer.
Yeah,
I guess that's the difference, really.
Yeah.
So really, the only hoops that are different are at the start of it, and there's no difference in terms of valuation or offer stage or anything like that. Everything is at the start of the process. So correct. I suppose, like we keep saying throughout, is as long as someone has contact with an advisor from the start, then you can start to build that relationship and figure out what you need to do and when you need to do it at the right time.
Yeah. Because there are, you will get lenders making that they will take stances on things. So I think it might be Santander won't go beyond 60% loan to value for a self-employed person. That basically just means they're cherry picking the business that they want from the self-employed community.
Yeah.
But there's plenty more that don't restrict it. It just, in any given day, week, month, year, a lender will take a position, and it's just about navigating to find the one that's got the position that best suits you. And that's obviously where we come in. You know, we've got all the research tools to find the answers to those questions that most people don't.
Yeah, we just had a really good question actually for you, Dom.
Yeah.
From Andy. So thanks for asking, Andy Humphreys. He said, with the introduction of 5 times income for employed,
yeah,
is there anything similar for self-employed?
It's a great question. I'd love to jump on a research tool and have a look. I mean, the loan to income caps, which is effectively what Andy's talking about, are a construct of the regulator that says, well, you can't lend irresponsibly, you can't lend beyond a certain number. Otherwise, it would just be, you know, if no caps were introduced, lenders could push it and push it and push it.
Yeah.
So 5 is typically the most you will go to. As far as I remember, the last time I looked at LTI caps, there was no differential between employed and self-employed, but you will get them with certain lenders. So I know that one of the building sites, I can't remember which one it was, for self-employed, they dialed it down to 4.25, might have been Halifax, but for an employed person, it would be 4.5. So you might get fractions of multiplier, but don't forget the multiplier is only one aspect of affordability. You know, you've got to take a hop and over. It gives you a rough guide, but it's not that's what you'll be able to get. It's just part of it's a rough guide calculation.
Yeah.
On the basis of the calculation. But again, you know, it's about, if you need to maximize affordability, the best person to do that for you is an advisor, because I've got research tools that will go out and, you know, scan a good part of the market, and then we can start to work backwards from there.
Yeah, no, perfect. That's a really good, thanks Andy for the question. It's a good question. Maybe that's something we can do some research in as well, and come back next week with a few more answers to it if we could look into it.
Yeah,
I suppose unless anyone's got anything else to add for today, I was just going to say from you, Dom, has anything changed in the last couple of weeks on the mortgage side of things? I know we've been talking through, but just generally with anything you've been dealing with, seems like there's more lenders, like you say, lots of them coming back at 10%. Is there anything of interest to talk about on that side of things?
I mean, no, there's nothing earth shattering. I mean, we've seen a couple of the specialists come back in, which is helpful for what's called the distressed side of the market. So somebody's got, you know, adverse that during the height of the pandemic, lenders were being very choosy about who they lent to. There's now a bit more competition in that space than was there previously, which is pretty much down to one lender unless you went through a packager, which obviously drives up the cost. So no, 90% is very vibrant. There's a few kinks here and there with certain lenders on things like, you know, Santander, the 60% cap on self-employed, but that's very much an outlying position that a lender's taken. In general terms, you know, we've seen a bit of downward pressure on some of the interest rates as well, because competition drives, you know, the lenders all want their share and they don't want to lose market. So no, market's in good shape. There's lots of appetite for the right packaged loan, and so long may it continue. There's no sign of the tension that we were getting in. Well, we were just about to get into this time last year. So touch wood, that will continue.
Confidence is in there, isn't it? Because every day we're seeing, or every couple of days we're seeing new lenders coming in, and as you said last time, all the big names are starting to jump back in. So that hopefully gives people the confidence, and definitely gives people the confidence to start buying stuff again.
And from our point of view, aren't we? No, we're still seeing loads of viewings on listings. We've got people are still out there viewing properties and buying and making offers regularly every week with us. So it just shows you that actually the market's still there.
There's also innovation, guys. So I won't say the name of the lender, but it's a startup that we've got access to. they've seen an opportunity born out of frustration with the Help to Buy scheme. It's now restricted to first-time buyers, or as was always only on new property. They've come up with their own proposition that can be applied to existing homes, not new homes, and it can be applied to anybody. So they will act as, they're sort of acting as that equity loan provider.
Oh, really?
So if you need to bridge your gap in affordability between the deposit you've got, what you can borrow, and the value of the property, this lender will step in with an interest only. It's not a bridge, that's the wrong word, but it's an equity loan, and obviously they get, they earn from the interest only element of the loan, but also the share of the sale at the end. So it's very similar, and it has it's an opportunity cost effectively. But if it's the difference between you getting the property that you want and not, and that you've got to work through to an exit, it's a perfectly reasonable solution. That's just one example of innovation in the market.
That's really good, isn't it? It's almost like like you say, like a help to buy for a residential home in a nutshell, isn't it?
Yeah,
So
residential help to buy for anyone, regardless of whether you own the property or not.
Nice.
And lastly, Dom, Ian said, good to see Dom in a pink hoodie.
I apologise, Ian, it's not the right pink, and I keep said, well, I haven't even said to the guys, I'm very happy to wear the colours on live shows and when out walking my dog.
Get one of the hats as well.
Or if it can be arranged, or the hat, I'm down with it. Absolutely.
He did have one question. He did have one question on the back of that as well. He said, any thoughts on buy-to-let mortgage changes?
That's a very open question. We're seeing rates coming down. Precise came out, I think, yesterday, and they've shaved some of their rates. I did a quote today for a client, 2.14, I think, on a buy-to-let first-time landlord. There's lots of competition in that market. I think there's some potential concern about HMOs in terms, how popular will they be depending on their setting? Where are they? How easy will it be to let those rooms if people living in them for workplaces or universities? I don't know. It's all a bit up in the air, isn't it? So we've got multi-tenants in one property, but generally buy-to-let seems pretty buoyant to me.
No, good.
Well, mate, continue.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's some of the bits we can talk about next week. Maybe go into some of the buy-to-let mortgages, things that are coming out, and any questions we get in the meantime.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
I mean, good episode for next week. So I think is that everything, guys? Anything else to talk about tonight?
Pretty simple.
Yeah.
Perfect. 23 minutes, not too bad. Neil, you can tell Amy that we tried not to waffle too much.
She'll be pleased.
You can tell her I haven't taken it as personal feedback, because it is.
I tell you what as well. Talking about Ian, I did see on one of his live chats, he asked everybody who they think is going to finish in the top four. So should we finish with that quickly? In the Premier League, I still hope Liverpool will make it. That's what I'm going to say.
I'm obviously hoping United is staying at first, but they keep jumping up and down. Who knows?
I think it'll be Man City top, Man United second, and between Liverpool and Leicester for third and fourth. That's my shout.
As long as Liverpool don't win it, I don't care.
They're not going to.
They're not going to this time.
I think you're probably right, Dan. To be honest, I'm an Arsenal fan. I've got an annual bet with a Chelsea fan and a Man United fan with free curry. I lost last year. I think I'm going to do a Paddy Power Indian cash out as soon as they're open. I'm just going to buy them one.
Easiest thing. I don't think Arsenal are getting in there.
No.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for watching, everyone. As usual, if you've got any questions after this, just give us a shout, and we'll cover those next week.
Perfect. Cheers, guys.
Take care. See you in a bit.